Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. Happy Friday, it's September 19th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Recently, a bill was on its way to Governor Newsom's desk for a signature. It would have made it easier for farmers to install solar panels on their farms. But at the last minute, the proposal was withdrawn.
What's been interesting about this bill is that it really divided the farming industry.
We'll learn more about what's behind this in just a moment, but first, these headlines. Officials in Tulare want to attract new visitors to the city. One idea is to build an indoor-outdoor adventure park. City officials are reportedly considering the idea proposed recently by a private developer, according to the Business Journal. City leaders say they want to expand options for residents and visitors when it comes to entertainment. Officials are looking at potentially a 100-acre adventure park. Merced City leaders approved a new airline to run passenger flights from the Merced Yosemite Regional Airport. Officials awarded a contract to Contour Airlines, according to our news partner, the Merced Focus. Contour Airlines is based in Tennessee, and it'll provide Merced customers with flights to LAX and Las Vegas. A new report says students learning English as a second language in California are making steady academic progress. That's despite recent educational funding challenges and immigration enforcement actions. Esther Quintanilla, with our newsroom partner, the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, reports more findings from the study.
English learners, known as EL, are some of the top students in the state. In the central San Joaquin Valley, where nearly a fifth of all K-12 students are EL, districts are shifting their focus to boost learning outcomes amid declining enrollment and lagging reclassification rates after the COVID-19 pandemic. Districts across the region are implementing new strategies to further raise their EL students through academic boot camps, dual language immersion programs, and after-school tutoring. The study from the Public Policy Institute of California found Valley districts are expecting to see growth in enrollment and academic achievement through the end of the decade, while other districts in the state expect continued enrollment declines. In Fresno, I'm Esther Quintanilla.
California state legislators have passed a bill seeking to improve foster care placements for Native American children and families. The bill would allow tribes and tribal organizations to work closely with the state's Department of Social Services. Currently, tribal groups do not have a say in addressing how to keep youth out of foster care. Native American children are placed in foster care at about 4 times the rate of other children. Fresno County has reopened Avocado Lake Park to the public. The U.S. Forest Service was using the park next to the Kings River as a camp for crews working on the Garnet Fire. Crews have managed to bring containment of the fire to nearly 90%.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Body 20 in Fresno's Fig Garden Village, offering full-body electromuscle stimulation training sessions. It's a high-tech, time-efficient way to help preserve and rebuild lean muscle. Each 20-minute one-on-one session is guided by a certified coach using FDA-cleared technology. Body 20 accepts health savings account cards. More information available by searching the Fig Garden location at body20.com.
And now to our main story. Drought is common in California, especially in the San Joaquin Valley, where water can determine whether farmers have a feast or famine on their hands. But what if farmers took water out of the equation and used their farmland for something else, like solar panels? Farmers would still get money from leasing their land to solar companies, and California would move the needle toward more renewable energy. Sounds like a win-win, right? Well, not to everybody, including those who don't want to change a long-running law that's protected farmland from development, known as the Williamson Act. A new bill in the legislature, Assembly Bill 1156, would soften restrictions from the Williamson Act to let farmers put solar on fallowed land. But the idea is dividing the agriculture industry, including key industry groups and farm bureaus. And to add to the drama, at the last minute, the legislator who introduced this bill put it on pause. To break down this bill and where it stands, I spoke with Rachel Becker, who covers water for our news partner CalMatters. She starts by explaining what happened as Assembly Bill 1156 was on its way to Governor Gavin Newsom.
So, interesting 11th hour twist in the last hours of the legislative session. Spoiler alert, it's not going to get signed into law, at least not this year, but the author said that she planned to keep working on it. And so here's what happened. The goal of the bill, AB 1156, was to incentivize energy developers and landowners who want to put solar farms with battery storage on fallowed farmland or farmland that's water stressed. And it would do that by tackling something called the Williamson Act, which is the 60-year-old law that was passed to keep urbanization and suburban sprawl from gobbling up farmland. And about half of California's 30 million acres of farm and ranch land is covered by Williamson Act contracts. And what they do is give substantial property tax breaks in exchange for keeping farmland in farming. But if landowners want to cancel their contracts early to put solar on the fields, that can lead to massive cancellation fees, like up to millions of dollars. So the bill would have allowed farmers and ranchers to suspend their Williamson Act contract to put solar and storage on water-stressed farmland specifically. Property taxes would go up and they'd avoid the cancellation fees. And so I was watching all of the legislative deliberations on this, and it looked like it was going to pass. It passed the Senate, and then it headed back to the Assembly for a final vote. But the author, Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, decided to shelve the bill because of implementation concerns from Governor Gavin Newsom's office. But Wicks said that she plans to work with the governor and hopes to move the bill next year. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on it.
Did she specify specifically what about implementing this she was concerned about?
Nope. Okay. I did not go into more detail. So I am very curious.
Okay, one of the stated motivations for this bill is that it hopes to help farmers use fallowed fields or areas of farmland that are not currently in use. Are there any particular reasons why so many fields here in the valley are fallow?
So farming did have a pretty good year this year. The California Department of Food and Agriculture put out a release the other day that the value of California agricultural production topped $60 billion for the first time. But there are also really big changes coming. There's the state's landmark groundwater law, which is known as the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, commonly referred to as SGMA, and it gives local groundwater agencies only 15 more years to rein in overpumping of the state's most depleted aquifers, many of which are in the San Joaquin Valley. We're also seeing surface water supplies made really unpredictable as climate change continues. And the Public Policy Institute of California has crunched the numbers, and they estimate that with no new water supplies, up to 900,000 acres of farmland in the San Joaquin Valley may have to go out of production to comply with the groundwater law. So really big changes coming.
Yeah. I thought it was quite poetic in your report that you wrote, quote, "The valley that was once a refuge for people fleeing the Dust Bowl is facing its own reckoning with dust and water scarcity." Can you elaborate on why this question of solar on farmland is such an existential issue for this part of California?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, this is California's agricultural heartland. I spoke to Michael Claiborne at the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, which is an environmental justice group that works in the San Joaquin Valley, and he put it really clearly. I actually don't think that this quote made it into the story, but it's one that stuck with me. We were talking about this projected loss of agricultural land under climate change and SGMA, and he said, what does that mean for existing communities that have relied on this land use for decades? Where do we go from there if it's not going to be agriculture? What is it? And that is really the fundamental question around this change that's coming, around this loss of farmland, given the future of water scarcity in this state. And what moves in, what fills the gap, and what does that mean for communities and economies that have been built up around agriculture?
Yeah, I recall a quote in your report from Ryan Jacobson, who leads the Fresno County Farm Bureau, who was skeptical of this and said, now it's solar panels, next is it apartments? There is some sort of hesitancy about converting this farmland to solar in this way because it could portend maybe major changes to the ag industry, which is a huge economic piece of the state, right?
Yeah, his concern and the concern of the California Farm Bureau and some other organic family farming, farmland conservation groups, they were really concerned that this bill would kind of undermine the Williamson Act, which they see as this really vital protection and subsidy for farming. And Ryan Jacobson's quote was really about this. Potentially, his concern was about this being a slippery slope. You're doing it for solar. Why aren't you doing it for affordable housing? Is what he said. You're doing it for housing. Why aren't you doing it for a racetrack facility? So that's kind of one camp. And what's been interesting about this bill is that it really divided the farming industry. I spoke to several farmers who have put solar on their fields, and they really saw it as a lifeline. As a low water use crop that allows them to hold on to this land that they hope to pass to their kids. And the sentiment was if they didn't plant solar on this land, all they would have is dust. And so it's been a very divisive issue.
Okay, so we've got folks who are for this, folks who are against it. The bill's been approved by the state assembly and the state senate. Then, as you mentioned, in an 11th hour decision, Buffy Wicks decided to halt moving forward with the bill because of her concerns over the governor's implementation of it. So what's next? What's the timeline for this? Is it still a possibility?
That's a great question. So the assembly member told my colleague, Stella Yu, that the governor's office had implementation concerns with the bill and that she was planning to work on it with the governor over the fall and hoped to advance it next year. And we actually saw a similar bill stall a few years ago. So it's an issue that keeps cropping up. And I think it's like we talked about, that this question of solar on farmland keeps coming up again and again, and it's controversial each time, and it reflects this change that's coming for the San Joaquin Valley, especially. Land is already being converted to solar with or without changes to the Williamson Act. The California Energy Commission crunched some numbers and told me that about half of the almost 100,000 acres of large-scale solar developed in California is already in the San Joaquin Valley. So to me, the question that this raises, and that I was really interested in exploring, and what I hope to keep exploring, is what a more water scarce future means for a region so deeply entwined with agriculture. So I'm interested in hearing people's thoughts. And if anyone wants to reach out and share their story with me, you can find my contact on the CalMatters website.
Rachel Becker, reporter with our news partner, CalMatters. Thanks for this reporting.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to hear more about the Williamson Act, you can listen to our February 24th episode with Fresnoland reporter Gregory Weaver, titled The Lucrative Farm Tax Break You Probably Haven't Heard About. And that is today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
It's rare to find a podcast that can actually change your life. But when the show's called Life Kit, that's kind of the whole point. I'm Mariel Segarra. 3 times a week on the Life Kit podcast, we guide you through a topic we could all use help with, from personal development to healthy living to managing your dinero, with takeaways so you can start living what you learn right away. Escucha el Life Kit podcast from NPR.